Hello, everybody, and welcome to my presentation, Right to Learn in the Modern World Language Classroom. So for a basic introduction, I just want to go through and just justify why I'm even doing this presentation or what it's all based on. So essentially in this presentation, I'd like to explain what the benefits are to Right to Learn as a learning tool, and to also give a few practical applications of this teaching method in the classroom, more notably, more specifically, the foreign language classroom. Before we get into that, it's absolutely essential to understand what right to learn even is. Um, so Drew University says that right to learn pedagogy builds on the fact that writing promotes active learning. Writing to learn assignments invite students to explore ideas raised in class discussion or reading, rephrase course content in their own words, make tentative connections, hypothesize, inventory what they know at this point in the class, and try out interpretations. WTL assignments also invite students to develop questions and take risks in content and style. Now, this is all fine and dandy when coming from a university, and there are many universities and sources out there that attempt to define right to learn, and many of these definitions you will find vary. But I like to go with a simpler definition. Writing to learn is writing in multiple content areas using informal writing to explore and express new ideas. It's often low stakes and ungraded. It's important to note that even though it says low stakes and ungraded, this doesn't mean that right to learn always has to be this way. It just means that a lot of times, depending on the context of the situation, it doesn't have to be graded. So there are various forms that writing can take, and here I went through the quote and highlighted the uh, the important forms. So journal writing, note taking, summaries, short essays, term papers, mini writing. For the exception of term papers, the majority of these are actually, you'll notice, are very short um, writing assignments. And for the purposes of this class, they will be the shortest form possible. And why? Um, and it's important to note that when applied to a French class, it is important to keep things as simple as possible. And I will explain that in a little bit. But WTL can reduce anxiety associated with writing in the target language. So right off the bat, just having shorter, simpler assignments, most of which are not graded, in which I can overlook grammar errors and spelling errors, uh, right off the bat will put a lot of students at ease. Another added benefit to Right to Learn is that it allows for students to focus more on idea creation and discussion as opposed to the mechanics of writing in and of themselves. Of course, when it comes to discussion, this is ideal for a foreign language class because the point of a foreign language class is to actually encourage open discussion in the target language. Also, the creation of ideas while using the target language uh, will uh, help students with many other skills, including communication skills. And it will also help to also fortify their writing skills as well. So it's kind of like a vicious cycle in this sense. It's also important to note that in Right to Learn, there are many models out there used, especially by universities, that encourage varying the forms of media. Of course, this deepens student understanding of grammar and vocabulary, but in using multiple forms of media, it can also give students much needed practice on how to edit and put together media and use varying online media tools to apply to when applying to other courses. They can use this to um, further um, practice their skills in other courses. So examples of connecting to our classroom text. So the two classroom texts we use in our French classroom, for example, is the Bien Dit, level 2 textbook, and we have a short reader called Un n'était pas comme les autres. And these two books are the primary text that we use in French class. One of the great things about Bien Dit is that it's very pictorial. It has a lot of images and words, which are much smaller, superimposed over the images. Un n'était pas comme les autres, the reader, has very short chapters, about 1 or 2 pages long, with very simplified language, and usually 1 or 2 full-page images to accompany those chapters as well. So these are both pictorial based textbooks that we use in our class. So the two texts that we have are ideal for Right to Learn because they complement each other rather well. The textbook, because it's primarily in picture form with words written over those pictures, allows for numerous amounts of writing prompts, short, medium, and long length in a class. So this allows for a large writing dynamic, if you will, in the classes. Furthermore, when integrating a lot of these images into writing prompts, especially when done in small groups, this can spark class discussion in the foreign language. We can also use these in various media. It doesn't all have to be written down on paper. This can, of course, be done online, and especially a lot of writing prompts can be done on things such as our blog. One such example that we can use Right to Learn with is what's the difference? And these are activities that are usually fun, engaging, and students in this case could partner together in the foreign language classroom or get into a small group of 3 or so, each one of which would have a language dictionary with them, and they would be required in a set amount of time to find all the differences. Of course, they would have to write them all out in sentences. Now, of course, some groups may only be able to write 5 or 6 sentences in the allotted time, while other groups may be able to go up as far as 10 or even exceed that number. But these are all very small, short sentences with just very basic grammar use and conjugation. Instead, here the students would be focusing more on content, such as identifying and looking up the actual words themselves, as opposed to worrying about syntax or agreement and other grammar mechanics of grammar. So there are some new activities in this research that I found that I think will be very useful in future classes. One of the things that I would like to implement more is getting students to be aware of their own thinking and how they think in the foreign language, otherwise known as metacognition. So one of the ways in which we could do this is by adding a self-assessment portion to their writing rubrics or their project rubrics. Furthermore, we could also split projects to have a before section and an after section. So, for example, at the beginning of the year, I could have a recording of a student describing him or herself in September, and then at the end of the year in June, have them do the exact same assignment. And in reflecting on both of these, if they were to do this in written form as opposed to oral form, uh, uh, the goal is to have the student then look at their final writing and then look back at their writing in September at the beginning of the year and actually make a before and after consideration and observation. And of course, they would write about the differences and how they have improved and what things that they work better on and how their thinking works or how their thought process has changed. Another important thing in using Right to Learn is, in my research at least, is that feedback, especially constant feedback, is absolutely important. As was stated by Fry and Villagomez, Right to Learn was a valuable process that facilitated reflection, and the instructor feedback was valuable. So in many of the articles that I frequented in researching this project, one thing that kept popping up was that feedback is an essential part of the Right to Learn process. That in order for Right to Learn to be effective in any way, or in all the forms where Right to Learn was seen as effective in the final outcome, was because many students wrote that getting feedback, frequent feedback from their teacher was essential. Another activity that I would like to implement is pictorial summaries. In foreign language, we do a lot of things based on images, mainly because students, especially at the level 2 in foreign language, do not have the linguistic capability to express all of their thoughts and ideas. So putting writing activities, pairing writing activities to short drawing activities is actually an ideal way to encourage communication in the foreign language. And Right to Learn encourages the use of this because Right to Learn, again, is not necessarily focusing on long, complex writing assignments that take days or weeks to put together and organize. Instead, it's focusing more on low stakes, if not colloquial, forms of writing. Another thing that I skipped over is actually journal writing. Journal writing is something that I've done off and on in my classes, but I've found that if one of the important tenets of also Right to Learn is that it be done frequently. So one thing I would like to do more of is journal writing because it actually encourages creativity, metacognition, and it forces students to write on a regular basis, which will, of course, get them to think a lot more. And of course, this will self-feed. So why? So why are we doing these things? Basically, so why did I want to implement these specific types of activities? And the main reason is because they're fun. Uh, Spot the Difference is an activity that, when used in class, especially for writing, students don't really even focus so much on the writing as they do on the completing the task and working with their partner. Same with journal writing. Although students do see it as a writing task, if they are writing about something that they themselves get to choose and they find interesting and is fun, then writing becomes less of a task. Same thing with other activities such as drawing, because for many students, especially who enjoy art, this may not also be seen as a task. It may be seen as an opportunity to openly doodle, but apply their doodling to French class. So, in conclusion,